Hare Krishna. So can just someone confirm on the chat or something if I'm audible? Mm. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. Oh, there is noise in the background. Huh? Is it too bad? Yeah, I think there are children playing outside, and that is what is coming here. Is it too much? Then I'll have to move to some other place. I mean, I'll have to move inside. Okay, it's not too much, right? Okay, fine. Yeah. I mean, I'm sitting in the balcony because the internet connectivity is better here. Sometimes if I sit inside, internet is not that good. Okay, so we will get started. So, we were studying theme-wise Bhagavad Gita some months ago. We had done the first 6 chapters, right? That is where we are currently. The first 6 chapters were done. However, before we go ahead to the 7th, there were some themes. Yeah, sorry, about option to speak, I will enable later. Yeah, this is a different account. This is actually my office account that I use. That's why my college name is there. I will enable everyone. 1 second. Let me just see how to do that. I don't know. I think I can. I can enable everyone to speak. So maybe I'll do that a little later, when there are QA, question answer or something. Right. So we'll just continue like this right now. So I'll enable that a bit later. Okay. So, we were doing the first 6 chapters, which we had done maybe around 6 months ago. Then I had gone into Ramayana. We were doing 18 themes of Ramayana as understood by Ramanujacharya. We are going back to Bhagavad Gita, essentially also because this month is Gita Jayanti. We are having Gita Jayanti on 14th of December. And we are distributing lakhs of Bhagavad Gitas all around the world. So I thought this is a good time to actually, even learn something from Gita, learn some concepts from the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so we had done till now the first 6 chapters. And obviously the first 6 chapters of Gita are primarily centered around action, right? Because Krishna wants Arjuna to get into action mode. The last 6 chapters are centered around jnana, and the middle 6 chapters are centered around bhakti. Okay, so it is such a beautiful combination of karma, jnana, and bhakti. Correct? So bhakti is sandwiched between karma and jnana. So both of these things are there because both of them are also important. So we cannot think that they are not important in any way. And that is what we were emphasizing always when we were studying the first 6 chapters, because this idea of seeing in isolation or looking at verses in isolation, we discussed a lot on these things, looking at some verse like Sarva Dharman Parityaja in isolation and thinking that everything else is now cancelled, or, so many things like that. So these are clearly a problem because this is not what Krishna is actually speaking in Bhagavad Gita, because Krishna is speaking something integrated where he's adding to the understanding. Correct? He's not cancelling things. He's actually adding and making that understanding more and more refined. And we also saw in great detail how there is a difference between the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita and the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Both are titled Karma Yoga, if you carefully see. But in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is talking about what we call as unconscious competency, where you are not even aware that you are externally doing your duty in the world. That means you're so good at whatever you're doing that you do it as a matter of fact. So just to give a simple example, like we see children, right? children, sometimes in the noonday sun also, they keep playing cricket or football. And if you tell the child that, Array, it is so hot, why do you want to play at this particular time? Go later and play when there is shade. The child will say, no, 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 it's not at all hot. Why he's not sensing the heat? Because he's so absorbed in that playing that he just doesn't know what's happening around. So that's like an unconscious competency. That means you don't know the surrounding. You're not so much, so that's what Krishna is speaking, right? In the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Those beautiful verses are there in the 5th chapter, text number 8, 9, where Krishna is saying that a person in divine consciousness, he's seeing, touching, hearing, smelling, doing so many things, but he's doing nothing at all. So imagine, just reflect on those verses where Krishna is saying that. So Krishna is actually expecting us to do work at that particular level where we interact with the world, but at the same time, we are, that means we are so good with it, with what we are doing, that, we are, it's like you don't even have to exert so much for that, right? Like Arjuna is Dhanurdhar. So for him to shoot arrows is just a second nature. It is so easy to do that. Not that he has to struggle so much. So we discussed this point, if you remember, that we have to invest our consciousness more into an action when you are not expert at it. So if you remember, we used to discuss examples like a lady who is expert in cooking. As she's cooking, she's singing some bhajans when she's cooking because she's so good at it. So she doesn't have to, so meticulously think at every step. Like she will add salt, she will add some spicing. It happens so naturally for her that she's absorbed in some kirtan and bhajan and she's doing that. So this is how it happens when you are competent at that work, where you're not even aware that you're doing it. You like that work, you're competent in it, so you're not even aware that you're doing it. So in this way, a person is also free from that, as in, right? So that is what is being spoken of in the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Correct. And we also discussed how, towards the end, we conclude with the 6th chapter about this yoga, where though the 6th chapter is concluding with Krishna saying, Yoginam api sarvesham madhyater mantaratmana, that the topmost yogi is one who's fixed in me. But before that, Krishna says, Tasmat yogi bhavarjuna. First, become a yogi. Okay, so we have been repeatedly hammering on this point that Bhakti Yoga, at least as per the way Gita is talking about, is not cancelling karma, jnana and all. It is only adding to it. Okay, so this is something that we have touched on. So just like, this example also we have given, just like words, letters form words, come together to form sentences, sentences become essays, essays become books, books become a thought process, right? But at every level, the previous level is also there, right? So similarly, we have seen about this. Now, what we will do today is we will take one shloka from the 5th chapter, which essentially is a very nice summary of, what is happening in the first 6 chapters, what Krishna wants Arjuna to do. And we will explore that. And through exploring that particular verse, we will also understand the basic concept in these first 6 chapters. So I'm basically referring to Bhagavad Gita 5.7, where Krishna is saying, Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriyaha sarva bhutatma kurvan apina lipyate. So Prabhupada translates it like this: one who works in devotion, one who is a pure soul, and one who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. So why I'm calling this particular verse as an essential summary of what is happening in the first 6 chapters, because Krishna is speaking about the importance of 2-3 things. One is the importance of always working. That means karma is never given up, the karma yoga. And at the same time, such a person is not getting entangled. And why is he not getting entangled? For that, Krishna has said he works in a spirit of devotion. He controls his senses, and he is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. So Krishna has mentioned these particular qualities. Okay, so we are going to explore this particular verse in some way, because this is, if you carefully observe, a very good summary of what's happening in the first 6 chapters, because Krishna is talking about yoga in the 6th chapter. Krishna is talking about controlling the mind and senses in the 2nd chapter. Krishna is talking about working in the 3rd chapter. 5th chapter, Krishna is talking about not getting entangled in the 5th chapter. in the fourth chapter as well. So basically, it pretty much, gathers so many concepts that were there in the first six chapters. Okay, so I will begin, we will begin our discussion by something which is said by Madhvacharya in the context of this particular verse. Okay, so Madhvacharya, it seems, when he talks about this particular verse, Jitendriya. Jitendriya means controlling one's senses. Okay, so he elaborates on the story of Arjuna. So the story is in the Mahabharata, where Drona, basically, he decides to give Brahmastra to Arjuna. And when he gives Brahmastra to Arjuna, his son Ashwathama and Ashwathama's friend Karna, both of them come to Dronacharya and say that, please, even we need Brahmastra. Why are you giving Brahmastra only to Arjuna? Even we want Brahmastra. So it seems at that time, Dronacharya tells Karna and Ashwathama that either one has to be a Tapasvi Brahman or a Jitendriya Kshatriya. Okay, so Dronacharya says, it seems that either one has to be a Tapasvi Brahmana or a Jitendriya Kshatriya to be able to handle Brahmastra. And both of you cannot handle, both of you don't come in this category. So I'm not going to give you Brahmastra. And it is at that time that Karna tells Drona, please give me permission to go to Parshuram. And he leaves Dronacharya's Gurukul and goes away. Okay, so unlike what many times people see on television that Karna was rejected by Drona, it is not like that. Drona taught him till one point, but he left and he went to Parshuram because he wanted Brahmastra. And then, of course, we know what happens with Karna later. But the point here is, Madhvacharya emphasizes on this point that Arjuna was a Jitendriya Kshatriya. Jitendriya Kshatriya means he was a Kshatriya who was, see basically in one sense, generally we understand Jitendriya or controlling senses means to be completely withdrawn. Are you getting it? Generally, we all understand control of senses means we understand it in a very black and white context. Okay, in a black and white context, as in somebody who has completely withdrawn from the world, we understand such people to be Jitendriya. But here the Mahabharata refers to Arjuna as Jitendriya, and Madhvacharya also emphasizes on this point because Arjuna's greatness was he was very dynamic in his aspect of connecting to the world. Basically, that means unlike Ashwathama, if you see, in one way he was unmarried, he was brahmachari, all. But he is also not accepted as Tapasvi Brahman by his own father. His father, Dronacharya, also never accepted him at that level. But Arjuna, on the other hand, had 4 wives, right? He had Draupadi, Subhadra, Ulupi, Chitrangan. But still, he was considered Jitendriya. So the understanding is that Jitendriya, this particular tag is given to a person who is very dynamic. Dynamic means as in he understands when to engage his senses and when to withdraw. Because both are important. That means to completely go into sense gratification is considered one extreme. And to completely being withdrawn from the world is also, at least from the Gita perspective, not too useful. Because if you see in one way, in the entire Bhagavad Gita, we are talking about someone like Arjuna who was, who had to engage the senses, right? Krishna is not speaking Bhagavad Gita from the perspective of withdrawing from the world. Okay, so here also, this one particular point is made that generally in the Vedic tradition, if you go deeper into it, this complete withdrawal was not considered, given too much importance. Okay, it is said that if you see carefully, even if you see historically, like if you see Saraswati Thakur, from where did he pick up this whole idea of having monks in an ashram? He basically picked up from Ramakrishna Mutt, because they had this idea of saffron robes. Ramakrishna Mutt basically picked it up from these Christian guys, who have these fathers and priests who are completely so-called withdrawn. Of course, now we know that many of them engaged in so much child abuse, homosexuality, and whatever. But generally, they have, emphasized on this particular aspect. And if you go back, even the Vedantists like Shankaracharya, he established monasteries where people completely gave up everything and joined. And he copied it again, if you see, from the Jains and Buddhist monks. Because if you see the Buddhists and the Jains, they also had this particular system where they would emphasize a lot on complete withdrawal. So basically, it all starts from historically, if you see, this whole idea of completely withdrawing started from the Buddhistic thought process. Okay, as in a very organized way, mind you. I'm not saying that in our Shastra that is not there. We had four Kumaras, or we had some examples like that, but not in a very organized way of making people a monk and saying that this is really important for spiritual realization. The way Buddhistic people did it, the way Advaitavadis did it, the way the Christians did it later, etc. Like you follow people and you make them a monk, so to speak. The Vedic system never emphasized that. Somebody became a monk on his own. He had that inclination, like Narad Muni became, four Kumaras became. That's a different thing completely. But it's not in a very organized way, emphasizing on that this is very important. Okay, so this point. So the reason why it was like that in the Vedic culture is because of this thought of Bhagavad Gita, that ultimately you have to engage in the world, and Arjuna is the hero over here. Okay, so coming back to the story, Dronacharya told Karna and Ashwathama that neither of you are competent to handle this Brahmastra, so I'm going to give it only to Arjuna, and he gave. And we all know, and Madhvacharya talks about that story of Urvashi, how Arjuna was proposed by Urvashi, and it is said Urvashi told him that there is actually nothing wrong in us enjoying, because please remember, in the heavenly planets the laws are different, because as we discussed last time also, they don't even have a gross body. There is no discharge from their body. There is no sweat. There is no urine, stool, nothing. It's just it's like only mind, so it's like that. It's only subtle body. So they don't have this concept of contamination at all. So Urvashi said that here these laws don't apply only. But he was very insisting that no, I want to follow this. And it is said that even Indra was very surprised looking at Arjun's ability to, be so restrained that he could reject the proposal of Urvashi. He was looking at Urvashi as a grandmother. He said that I don't want to do this, right? So, and it is generally said Indra is very, very, what shall I say, very fussy about his position. He's always very guarded that nobody should occupy his position, because he has lost his position so many times. Correct. But then with Arjuna, it was not like that. He gave him half the throne and all that, right? We know that. Okay, so this is about Arjuna's capacity as Jitendriya. There is another story I heard recently. This was from a Sri Vaishnava. This is from a particular Mahabharat, which is very popular in South India, written by one author. I forgot his name. But in that, there is this particular story that comes, that again tells about Arjuna's greatness. It basically says that Arjuna was so great that it says that when the Pandavas married Draupadi, they had a system that every year one of the Pandavas would be the husband of Draupadi, as in, right? So, and then the next year that would change. So this is how they had a system, it seems. The 5 Pandavas, when they married Draupadi, each year Draupadi was a wife to one of them, right? And the next year that would change, and so on. And there was some blessing also with Draupadi, that she would regain her chastity and all that. Anyway, so what happened is, it is said that after the 12 years of Vanvas were over and they had to go for the 13th year of exile, they were walking towards Virata. When the Pandavas were walking towards Virata, it is said Draupadi was very tired and she couldn't walk. She was too tired. She said that I really cannot walk now so much. So that it is said in that particular year, she was the wife of Yudhishthira. Okay, so generally Bhima can lift anybody, right? Bhima is very strong and he can easily lift Draupadi and go. But it is said that Bhima tells Arjun that, hey, look, Arjun, I cannot lift her because this year she is Yudhishthira's wife, and if I lift her, I may not be able to see her like that, because I may get some other thoughts. On the other hand, you are very self-controlled, so you can lift her and yet be unaffected by that. And it is said Arjun says, okay, and he lifts Draupadi and they walk. Okay, so that is a story which is there in this version of Mahabharata. It again shows the greatness of Arjun, that how Jitendriya he was, where he could even, lift her, and though in that particular year, she was not his wife, quote unquote, he could be completely unaffected by that particular situation. Okay, so this is about the ability of Arjuna. And the point which is being emphasized in our Bhagavad Gita is that Krishna basically wants everyone to come to, some level like that, where we are able to interact with the senses in the world yet be unattached with that. That means you have woman, you have money, you have all these things, but at the same time you maintain a degree of vairagya from it, as in detachment, as in you're not affected too much by it, right? There is one thing to be associated with sense objects, other thing is to be very deeply affected and literally be illusioned by that. Okay, so that's why for grahasthas especially, if you see the Vedic system again, there is a lot of fasting emphasized. I was hearing again one Sri Vaishnava scholar, so they were saying that how it is very important, especially for men to fast. So especially fasting completely on Ekadashi, Nirjala every Ekadashi as possible. So, or even if you see this whole concept of even in Amavasya, they take only one meal a day. Especially those who have lost one of their parents have to do Pitru Tarpan and all that. So they eat only once a day on Amavasya. And even on Chaturthi, this whole idea, we have like Chaturthi, sometimes we Maharashtrians say that they eat in the evening or something, I think. They don't eat in the daytime, right? So all these rules, it is said that these were for everybody. This is not that it was only for one category of people. But this whole idea of fasting, that means you withdraw all your senses from the sense object on these particular days for this much time. It kind of is helpful, for someone to come to that platform of Jitendriya, because ultimately karma yoga has to be done at that level where you're interacting with the senses, but at the same time you maintain some disposition of vairagya as well. Okay, where you're not. So, but that vairagya was never so black and white, thinking that I have to give up completely. So, in fact, it's very interesting. So, I was once hearing about this, that's why if you see, even if you see with reference to the other regulative principles, like if you see, for example, like we have discussed this many times in our QA group also, right? Like in the previous ages, of course, this is not for this particular age. In the previous ages, like a sage was allowed to impregnate a king's wife, right? Like Vyasdev impregnated Ambika Ambalika. If you see the rules for that, it's very interesting. It says that when a Brahmana had to impregnate like this a king's wife so that she gets a child, he had to completely smear oil on himself, and that act was done only once with that woman, and he will never see that woman again in life. So there were so many rules in that also, and it was really done by somebody who was tapasvi Brahman. Can you imagine? Where a man is, so of course in Kali Yuga, such a expectation is not there from us because nobody can do it. That's why it is forbidden in Kali Yuga. But I'm just saying that that particular act was allowed because the principle of contribution to the world was considered more important rather than so-called just sense control. Okay, because a Brahman may say that I just want to be self-controlled. I don't want to, touch this particular woman and all that. So that's good. But then this woman happens to be a queen and she does not have a child. So unless she is impregnated by someone of that level, such a child will not be born, who will be competent to be a king, right? You can't just, take, like nowadays there are sperm banks where there are anonymous donors and you don't even know what is the genetics of the person whose sperm is there over there, correct? But if you see in this Vedic system, so such an act was permitted, and so many stories where it was permitted. And this is all underlying, the underlying philosophy behind this act you can see in the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, which is basically the point that karma has to be done in this world as a contribution. You can't simply run away thinking that I will not do it. That's the underlying theme. Similarly, even about the other things like eating of meat and all that, right? We have seen examples of so many examples we have discussed before, like in Shraddha ceremony that would happen or rarely, or right? Because they were very practical about it. It was nothing. It was like contribution in the world is considered more important, not that just withdrawal, but that contribution had to be done in a controlled way also. That means you cannot let yourself completely loose. Okay, but at the same time, the idea that I have to completely withdraw was never considered great. As in, at least in an organized way, it was not encouraged too much. I was also hearing about this, that in Ayurveda, it is said that it even speaks of this whole idea that sometimes people in a very cold surroundings are permitted to drink alcohol once or twice a year. Okay, it is said that because in a very cold environment, a person may need this. So they're permitted. But the condition is that a person who will drink like that, he has to have self-control in the 11 months. I mean, not that in summer season, other seasons also he is drinking. Correct? So he was restrained from that. Of course, I'm not talking this because we have to implement that. That's not the point. The purpose behind quoting all these things is to understand the broad-mindedness of the whole Vedic culture, which is again based on this basic theme of Bhagavad Gita only, where you are very dynamic in the implementation of Dharma. It's not so static, it's not so rigid that there is nothing like completely yes and completely no always. In everything, it all depends on whether that contribution is needed or what, correct? So this is how, the entire Bhagavad Gita is, right? And this is how the entire Vedic system is. That's why many times, that's why it's not so black and white, it's so gray, as in it allows all these different levels and so on, correct? Now coming to another theme that I want to take today, it's again related to this verse, is where Krishna is saying here that he is dear to everyone and everyone is dear to him. Okay, so let's little bit focus on this also. This is my second theme for the day. First was Jitendriya, second is this particular theme, that everyone is dear to, he is dear to everyone and everyone is dear to him. Okay, and this is again, you see this theme again repeatedly Krishna making in many places in Bhagavad Gita. Like Krishna speaks about this in the 12th chapter also. When he speaks, that's very interesting again. We will explore that in great detail when we discuss 12th chapter. But in 12th chapter, if you see, when Krishna talks about a devotee, he talks about qualities of devotee. We sometimes miss that. He talks about devotee in terms of qualities only. If you have achieved these qualities, you are a devotee. That's how it is. If you see from text number 12.13 to 20. We'll come to that part later. There also these verses come, that a devotee is dear to everyone and everyone is dear to a devotee, okay, to a bhakta. So that is how Krishna describes. And Krishna describes such verses many places in Gita. Like even in 6.30, Krishna says, one who sees me everywhere and everything in me, he is never lost, nor is he ever lost for me. Correct? So we see that particular thing. So one thing I want to make here before we go ahead and explore this point further, which again we have discussed many times, is how the Gita, Bhagavad Gita, in a way, if you see, it's extremely secular also. I'm using this word secular in a very original context, not in the context of the Western definition of secularism, which had to be imposed by them. I'm talking here about secular because it is so, it is so much based on achieving certain qualities, achieving a certain paradigm in life, rather than just Shraddha. Yes, Shraddha is there. Krishna is talking about himself, like in 6.47, he's saying, one who is fixed on me, yoginam api sarvesha madgater antaratmana. Or in the 12th chapter, he talks about Krishna as a person, right? Where he's saying that manmana bhava madbhakta. Of course, he says in the 9th chapter, 12th chapter, he says, fix your mind on me, 12.8. So certainly the aspect of Shraddha is there in Gita. But at the same time, it is important to recognize this fact that by and large, Gita also talks about spiritual achievement in terms of achieving certain qualities, achieving a certain state of existence. Which is why what we also understand is, I mean, hypothetically imagine, suppose somebody is a Devata Pujak, somebody is a Upasak of the Brahman, impersonal Brahman. Or let's go one step further. Let us say someone is even a Christian or Muslim or whatever. But all these people, if they develop these qualities, if they genuinely develop these qualities, which the Gita talks about, we will have to appreciate and acknowledge that such people are also dear to Krishna. It is not that Krishna will not think that, oh, this fellow is a Shiva worshipper, or he is Upasak of the impersonal Brahman, hence he is not dear to me. No, Krishna will look in terms of the achievement of quality also. That is why I am saying that the Gita is truly a very secular thing, because there is Shraddha in it, but at the same time, this Dharma, this base is there, which is very, very solid. Okay, so that is why, we are having this. I'm sorry, I think. Yeah, I was out for a minute. I lost my connection. I think I've just stopped my video because I think I have an issue with bandwidth, so that at least I don't get disconnected. So currently I have just stopped the video. I'll come back to the video later, maybe during questions. Okay, or if once my bandwidth is a little better. Yeah. So I was making this point how Gita is, truly speaking, secular in the presentation, where qualities are actually emphasized so much. So why this is again very important for us to really understand, appreciate, and preach in the world today is because increasingly the world has become a place of where faith is like everyone is so much with faith, right? I mean, as in faith becomes the barometer to decide who is where, are ya par, kind of, correct? But this point again is very important. How dharma is the base, because when faith is the basis, it can become very superficial also. So I'll just give one example. So this I had heard obviously from Govind Prabhuji. I give this example. This was in the context of Radhanath Maharaj. So all of you will be able to understand this example as well. So it seems what had happened a few years back was that, when Maharaj was in Chaupati, there was this, Gaudiya sannyasi. His name is Narayan Maharaj. He's no longer there. He was a god nephew of Prabhupada, and he was very close to Prabhupada when Prabhupada was there. He was present during Prabhupada's sannyas. He was present during Prabhupada's passing away. So, of course, after Prabhupada passed away, his relationship with ISKCON was slightly, there were a lot of ups and downs in it, because he reinitiated some people who had, who gave up, who had problem with ISKCON. They would go to him and get reinitiation and so on. So it was a little bit, messy relationship, slightly. So anyway, but he had come to somewhere close to Chaupati, it seems. So our Maharaj, Radhanath Maharaj, as you know, he genuinely wanted to respect him and, show him respect. So he decided to go and offer obeisances to him and just, meet him, just go and greet him and be with him. So they went, it seems, Maharaj along with 2-3 senior devotees, they all went to meet him. So it seems when they went there, of course, they had a talk with him and all that. After the talk was over, when they were about to come, so it seems that Narayan Maharaj also asked Maharaj, is it true that you are not allowing your disciples to come and meet me and so on? So it seems our Maharaj felt very, very, embarrassed on that question, because this whole thing again of mine, yours, this is my disciple, this is your temple. I will not allow my disciple, my counselee to go to your temple and meet you. This is, truly speaking, this is not what Bhagavad Gita teaches, because if you see Gita, it has this very broad base. It doesn't, force faith in such a broad, in such a manner, like how, these Christians have my church and your church. I'm connected to this particular line of church and I go only to this church and not to your church and so on. So it's too choking, actually. So Maharaj wasn't obviously comfortable. But anyway, they had a cordial talk. And it seems when they were coming out, there were some 2-3 Western ladies. They had actually obviously taken initiation from this Narayan Maharaj. They were, so Prabhuji was saying that they were very new ladies, as in they didn't even know how to wear sari properly. I mean, there's this new convert from the Western world. So since they met Maharaj and they told him, or Radhanath Maharaj, they told him that you are very fortunate that you could come to our temple and meet our Guru. Your human life is achieved or whatever. You're too fortunate to be able to do this. So our God brothers who were there with Maharaj, they felt that, such a statement is spoken by a very new bhakta, with this particular system in mind, that my temple or my Guru is only the correct person. And anybody who comes here is indeed very fortunate. And how can you talk to somebody senior about their good fortune? It is actually violation of all etiquette also. As in, you don't even know who is Radhanath Swami standing in front of you. Just because he has come to your temple, you just, you can't look at him as a new bhakta thinking that he's fortunate just because he got assistance of your Guru. So this whole thing, this very narrowed psychology comes up when the entire basis of Vedic system, Bhagavad Gita also is not there. When you have understood Gita also only in terms of faith, that, faith to my Guru, my institution is the only important thing. And everyone else who's not in line with it, he is really, not doing well. Okay. So I want to speak of one more thing about Maharaj before we connect to this. So this is again related to Bhagavad Gita. Coming back to the Bhagavad Gita, I'll read 3 verses from the Gita, 18th chapter, and I'll connect it to what I'm talking right now. These are very interesting verses. So this is from 18th chapter, text 20, 21, 22. I'm just reading the translation from Prabhupada's Gita. So text 20 says that knowledge by which one undivided spiritual nature is seen in all living entities, though they are divided into innumerable forms, you should understand to be in the mode of goodness. Krishna is saying. Then in 21st verse, Krishna is saying that knowledge by which one sees that in every different body there is a different type of living entity, you should understand to be in the mode of passion. And in verse 22, Krishna is saying, and that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as all in all, without knowledge of the truth, and which is very meager, is said to be in the mode of darkness. Okay, I'm sure all of you have read these 3 verses of Gita. Let us try to understand these 3 verses in the context of what we are talking. Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma. So if you see, Krishna is talking about knowledge in the mode of ignorance means to see only one thing as the truth. So any neophyte disciple, whether he is in our institution or a Christian, Muslim, whatever, any guy who thinks that this is the only way, this is the, like I gave you the example of these 2 ladies who meet a very advanced sannyasi and say that it's your fortune that you came here, because this whole mindset is there that this is the only place where highest fortune is available. And no matter who the person is, unless he comes to this particular area, this particular place and surrender, he is not going to get the highest thing. Okay, so this kind of thought, if it is there, it is actually considered from the Gita perspective as mode of darkness. Okay, mode of darkness. That's why all these religions also, which are steeped in that thought that, this is the only way to do things, they tend to be very violent also, because mode of darkness means violence comes from that, correct? So that's why I'm sure all of you know last week about that Sri Lankan, right, Priyank, who was butchered in Pakistan just because he, tore one pamphlet outside his factory and put it in the dustbin, correct? So that is because this whole thought is there that this is the only thing. So this is the only thing in anything. Like, for example, I remember some of us also would think that this profession is the only profession which is ideal to devotees. Again, from the Gita perspective, it is mode of darkness. Because what is Krishna saying? Look at Krishna's words. Krishna is saying that knowledge by which one is attached to one kind of work as all in all. मतलब यही काम करना है. मतलब हम लोग बोलते थे ना एक जमाने में सबको टीचर बनना है या सबको ट्यूशन टीचर बनना है, यही भक्ति के लिए कंड्यूसिव है. So that is actually mode of ignorance as far as Gita is concerned. Just please think about this very carefully. How, what Krishna is saying in these verses. Okay. And then mode of passion, Krishna is saying that knowledge by which one sees different person in different body. Iska example kya hai? That means all these things like racism in the world, racism, where you say this is black, this is white, correct? All these concepts which are there in the modern world or whatever, where anyone is thinking so much in terms of difference, correct? Like simple example, like sometimes we give a lot of importance to someone who speaks English, and if somebody is only speaking Marathi or some vernacular language, we think ye Gauti hai. Okay, but this is actually mode of passion where you are making the division and seeing like that. Okay, because we people speak English, we are superior. This guy doesn't speak English, he speaks only Marathi, which means by definition he's a Gawar, Gauti kind of person. Whereas if you go to America, you will find everybody speaks English, but obviously 80-90% are completely Gauti only, as in they're bums, good for nothing. So just because they speak English doesn't make them sophisticated. Okay, so all these things are mode of passion. So whenever we are influenced by such thought process, to see people in terms of race, and to see people in terms of race, and to see people as higher, lower, to see people in terms of language, higher, lower, all these things, that is considered mode of passion as per Bhagavad Gita. Correct. Now coming to the mode of goodness, see what Krishna is saying in the mode of goodness. That knowledge by which one sees undivided spiritual nature in all living entities. that means to see a uniformity everywhere. To see a uniformity everywhere. Okay, so I'll again come back to Maharaj and give this example because this is really, something very striking if you think about it carefully. If you see Maharaj's journey home book, right? He has put photos of all the different people he met. Many of them he has put photo, right? He has put their picture of I met this Neem Karoli Baba, or so many people. He has put their pictures in the book. Actually, many very faithful followers of our movement, when they see that, they feel that, why do you put pictures of these people? They get like a promotion, as in, we should put only Prabhupada's picture, that kind of a thing. If you look at Maharaj's psychology itself, it is basically coming from the fact that, and Maharaj has not put these people's photograph or written about them very nicely as advertising, as a way for a preaching strategy. That's something again different. Like sometimes we think that we have to, in order to preach effectively, let us sound more inclusive so that everybody comes to us. So Maharaj certainly had no such strategy in mind intentionally that let me put these people so that everybody understands that Hare Krishnas are also very broad-minded. No, he genuinely feels that. That means if you ask him, he genuinely feels that all these teachers have contributed in my life. Certainly, Prabhupada contributed in an unparalleled way, which is why he is so. I'm also talking a little bit more about Maharaj because his Vyas Puja was there recently. On 7th December was his birthday. Correct? So we are trying to talk a little bit about him as well today. So if you see, Maharaj, it's not that he when he writes about these teachers or when he puts their picture in the photograph in his book, he genuinely feels indebted to them for whatever they contributed. Okay. Simultaneously, he has that complete loyalty to Prabhupada where he wants to do something for Prabhupada because of which he's in the West sitting and preaching. Okay. He doesn't see that as a conflict or a contradiction. And I think that this particular verse in the Gita, 18.20, this very much applies to the way Maharaj has been seeing these teachers. And this is a lesson for all of us. Because when the Gita says in 18.20, when Krishna says, see the same undivided thing everywhere, this applies even to your teachers. Even when we look at our teachers, we cannot say that this teacher is the only teacher of my life. I mean, even materially, it makes no sense. Like for example, if you see, like I may have had a favorite teacher in my school. Okay, she may have been my class teacher, my mentor, whatever. But so many other teachers have also contributed, right? I respect all of them also. In respect, it is not that I respect my favorite teacher a little more than others. Respect is for everyone, but attachment may be specifically to one teacher who may have contributed more or, with whom you may have a greater relationship. But this whole idea of seeing that undivided thing, it's a little bit like Advaita Chetana. Advaita Chetana means to see integration of everything, to see integration of your teachers also. That is actually mode of goodness, as Krishna is saying, because you cannot cut like that and say that these people are all bogus. Only one teacher was my teacher. This was never like that, correct? This was never like that. That's why. So I was just reflecting on this particular verse of Gita in terms of Maharaj as a personality, where he genuinely felt that, and though many people felt, and actually, if you see, because recently there was this one lady. Her name is I think what's her name, Rama Rani. She was a Western woman who was the disciple of this Neem Karoli Baba. She passed away recently. If you just Google Ram Rani also, you will get a lot of articles about her in various news recently. She was an American lady who was inspired by this Neem Karoli Baba. She took up to Hinduism and she really preached Hinduism powerfully in the Western academic circles and had a lot of influence among people there. So why I'm saying this is because, again, really becoming a student of Bhagavad Gita means to see that integration also. That means to see different teachers and the fact that even they have contributed. I love my teacher maximum, but that doesn't mean that these other teachers and their students have had zero contribution or, they were all humbug, or like sometimes, we speak like that as if, everyone else is completely useless and stupid. Only by Guru and by system is the genuine system. So this kind of system also, if you see, at least from the Gita perspective, it is not so much in line. Because Krishna does talk about when Krishna says that seeing that undivided, when Krishna is saying in 18.20, seeing the undivided spiritual nature in all living entities, this applies everywhere, and we'll have to actually implement that in our life. We cannot simply, just leave that verse and go ahead. Correct? And if you see that also, if you see the 12th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, very interesting. If you see the 12th canto, before Parikshit is about to die, please go and read those verses in the 12th canto. I think the 10th chapter or something, 8 or 9, 10th chapter, where Parikshit is about to depart and Shukdev Goswami speaks to him. Final lesson. He basically says that, I'm not different from the absolute truth. If you read those verses, if you just read the translations of those verses in the 12th canto, one may feel that, this looks like Mayavad, because they are so much against that Mayavad that when we see any such verse, we become very alert and we feel that, hey, my God, how is this being said? And sometimes we say Shukdev Goswami said that just to pacify all the other guys who were sitting there in the assembly, because there were so many other people also. That is again putting it on Shukdev Goswami as if it was a preaching strategy. Even if it was, the point is that Shukdev Goswami does speak about, seeing that undivided thing. Because in that mood, we coming back to the verse that we took today, this whole thing of becoming dear to everyone and everyone being dear to that person, that also comes in. Because then you are not so sectarian in your application in the real world, where you're able to see that. So I think, these are some very important lessons that we could gather from this particular chapter of Bhagavad Gita, this whole particular thing. So I would like to take some questions now. I'll not go more than this. So let's see if there are some questions and then we will end. Okay, so 1 second. Let me see if anybody is raising their hand or whatever. And yeah, so I will just, permitted, Prabhuji. I think, I don't know whom I permitted. Balram Mita Prabhu, is that or
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yeah, Haripur.
Prabhuji, like we were discussing about Dharma and Shraddha. So Dharma is like the basic paradigm which Krishna is expecting, and that is a common paradigm and a common expectation from everyone.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, in the 12th chapter, as you were mentioning, that like the Krishna starts with the highest level of completely being absorbed in him.
Yeah.
So when we again start saying that, okay, the highest level is Shraddha in Krishna. So then again, are we not becoming sectarian if we say that? So yes, we understand that basic expectation of Dharma is there, but then where do we draw the line when we say that Krishna, the love of God, love of Krishna is the highest?
Mm-hmm. Okay, now see, even if you see in that love of God thing, Prabhuji, there is, if you see, there is a lot of variety in that also. So for example, you have all these Vaishnava Sampradayas who may be devoted to Narayana. Okay. And they are also considered lovers of Krishna in a way, right? So the point is the Krishna Tattva, if you carefully see, there is Krishna the person, yes. And also there is this entire expansion. See, because when you say absolute truth, it is in a way a very broad definition. If you see, for example, the Chaitanya Charitamrita verse 1, which says, Vande Guru Nisha Bhakta Nisha Nisha Avatarakan Sat Prakasham Tachat Sakshep Krishna Chaitanya Samyakam. So Krishna Savaraj Goswami says that is the definition of absolute truth. He says absolute truth is the Lord, his energies, his consort, his incarnations, his devotees, and the spiritual masters. All put together is the absolute truth. He defines like that. So even when we talk about the absolute truth, there also the definition is kept very broad by and large. It's always kept very broad. And as far as the Shraddha and this mood is concerned, yes, for example, so this I would like to quote, one Prabhupada's godbrother whose name was Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj. So he writes about this. He says that when you become a great lover of Krishna, as the person Krishna, you do become very sectarian in your thought. He says that, and you are completely dysfunctional in society, he writes. So these are his statements. He's a very famous scholarly person. Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, our Prabhupada was also very close to him. So he basically writes in one of his writings that a person who's a lover of Krishna is dysfunctional in society, right? Like he gives the example of Gaur Kishodas Babaji, who was sitting and chanting in Navadvip. It is said that sometimes some boys would just come and throw stone at him. And Gaur Kishodas Babaji Maharaj would say that, I'm going to complain to Yashoda now that you are doing, Krishna and Gopas are troubling me. I mean, these boys were some street urchins in Bengal, who were just throwing stones at him and, in our understanding, actually causing a big disturbance. But he was in a completely different world only, where he had nothing to do with this world. So this Bhakti Sridhar Maharaj, basically, he writes that a person who is very much focused on the person Krishna, sometimes he can become very dysfunctional in society. And they become also. But he says that they don't make that as a system in society. Like if you see Madhavendra Puri, he writes in one very famous verse, he writes, Sandhya Vandana Bhadramastu Bhavato Bhosnana Tubhyam Namo Godeva Chatarpana Vidas Naham Kshama Kshamyatam. He says, I can't do any of these things. I can't offer respects to the forefathers. I don't have time only for all that. I am so engrossed in love of God. Mere paas time hi nahi hai sabke liye. And that is enough for me, he says. But the thing is, these things are never made as a system where, it is hammered on everyone and said that, no, you have to be like this. Are you getting it? So I think that, see, the Gita, that is why the Dharma and Shraddha part of the Gita, now both are there. And in Shraddha part, certainly becoming a devotee of Narayan, becoming a devotee of Krishna, the 200 form of Krishna, from a rasa perspective is the highest, but that in never demeaned or made the whole aspect of dharma in Gita any less important. So I think what happens with us sometimes is that we get lost so much in that importance of that loving the personal form of Krishna so much that we de-emphasize or think that all these other things are just there around. So that is not like that, because Krishna's primary goal behind speaking Bhagavad Gita was establishing the dharma in Arjuna. He spoke about Shraddha as a matter of fact, but the primary goal was, if you see carefully, that he wanted Arjuna to become contributing in society. So I don't think we should see these rasa aspects, especially in Shraddha, as a competitor or as a minimizer of the dharma aspect of Bhagavad Gita. I think when we do that, we commit a mistake, because we lose that story only, right? I mean, correct. We lose focus of that entire story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Subhuji, so I think what I got is that yes, Shraddha may be highest and it may be very individual, but that does not mean that we are going to demean others who may not have our Shraddha, as long as they are following the dharmic principles.
Yeah, not only we, Krishna doesn't demean. Arey Prabhuji, we have discussed this many times. If you see, I mean, I was speaking about this also earlier when I was speaking from 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna, if you see from 4.25 to 28, see, sometimes, we hear these verses where, we hear these verses about, what shall I say, our general understanding of demigod worship, for example, in Gita is what Krishna has condemned demigod worship. Impersonal Brahman, Krishna has said that all these are foolish people. Right? There are some verses where Krishna talks about the danger of that, but Krishna has appreciated all of them. Krishna has said in 4.25, Deva Meva Pare Yajnam Yogina Paryupasate. Krishna says some yogis perfectly worship the devatas by offering sacrifices to them. Krishna is talking them as perfected yogis. Please read that verse. So Krishna has not spoken about, Krishna has spoken about these people also very positively. Are you getting my point? But we fail to see those verses only. We think that demigod worship means we generally think of, Kamesh Tesra Sutajnana, where Krishna says, and that is there. That verse is also there. That verse is there because there is a danger of becoming, very, what shall I say, becoming very greedy when you go to Devata. Correct? Now? That verse is there. But at the same time, Devata is important also. Now? That's why, I mean, I had this realization recently when I went to GV. There was this Katyayani temple. I don't know how many of you, when you visited GV, you saw that. When you enter the campus, you have to walk left almost 5-10 minutes. There is a Katyayani temple. And there our GV people told us, don't take photos of this place and put up and all that. So basically what had happened, so I think I've told this point here also. that entire kshetra, it is said that it belonged to that particular Devi. And, there are many astrologers and all who said that you have to give that Devi a position and give her some respect. But then we did that, but still we are very fearful that maybe others in ISKCON will criticize us or whatever. So that's why the managers tell that don't take picture there and upload it and all that. Because otherwise some people will start asking, why did you have Devi over here? And, Devi should not be there and all. The point I'm saying, Krishna sees Gita in a very integrated way. Krishna is not seeing any of these people as a competitor. Krishna sees all of them. Krishna sees them as at various levels of perfection also. And that's a fact also. Even in the Vedic system, even in Bhagavatamrita or something, there is this one point made by Sanatan Goswami where he says that a person could perfectly worship a Devata, and in that also he can reach Krishna. That's why I'm saying that Krishna's path is very, very broad, and Krishna doesn't look at any of these people as, in any way lower, etc. So Dharma is extremely important. And this whole tendency of seeing Shraddha is so important that the Dharma is not unimportant. This is very dangerous, because in this, what happens is you end up rejecting 80% of Bhagavad Gita. Correct. Like I was giving this example, right? I mean, when all the gurus that have contributed in your life, they have a contribution. Correct. That's what we see, the way Maharaj describes in his books, because that's what Gita calls on you. Seeing it, everything very Shraddha based, can make it can make the vision very narrow. That's what we are saying. I hope that point is clear, Prabhu.
So Prabhuji, but like our teachings in ISKCON, our like a lot of Bhakti Shastri courses and lot of studies, there's so much around Shraddha, isn't it? So, and when we hear that again and again, and when we're exposed to different people and read books again and again, so the Shraddha is being hammered again and again.
Yeah.
So, so and it aligns with our mission also of ISKCON.
Yeah. So that is, see, aligning with Shraddha a lot is not a problem. I will not see that as a competition to Dharma. But if anybody de-emphasizes on any aspect of Dharma, then that's a problem. Then we'll have to tell them that, no, see, Bhagavad Gita talks about these things. So you cannot reject it. That's the point we have to make. So holistic understanding of Bhagavad Gita means we'll have to accommodate all these verses also, no, Bhagavad Gita. We can't just rub them off and say that only from beginning to end, Krishna is saying Manmara Bhava Bhakto. So, right? So we will have to, so I think that's fine. I wouldn't hold anyone responsible for our understanding or misunderstanding. I think in some ways this also happens, with anyone who becomes a devotee, quote unquote, or whatever, in a very, like overnight devotee we become many times. All of us have also become like that. We had one own path and suddenly, complete transformation kind of. So sometimes it happens in that, where like a new convert, he is very, he is overzealous about his faith and everything. So this sometimes happens, but that's okay in the beginning, but it cannot be like that whole life. So, yeah.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you.
Haribol. Yeah, Vaibhav Anand Prabhu, you want to speak? I'll just allow you to talk. Yeah, permitted.
Dandavat, thank you, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, how this concept of differentiation within Varnashram system works, like Jati system, untouchability, and not eating at various jatis. How does that system work within the Varnashram? That is my first question. I'll ask another after this.
Yeah, good. See, these systems also which are there, they are actually with reference to cleanliness and what shall I say, protection of the jati. If you see the jati system, it actually has got destroyed in whatever way it has in India due to too much of intermingling, too much of eating outside of jati, right? Because that what happens is it completely disturbs all the standards or whatever a person is following. See, it is not so much in the context of looking at somebody else as fallen or whatever. It is about maintaining your own standards of life, that if you eat anywhere, you lose your caste. So this is there in Chaitanya Charitamrita also, that story of that whatever, one Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's follower who, correct, I forgot that, it comes in Madhya Leela, right? He was told that he has become a Muslim now, and and he has to drink hot ghee and die, and in the next life he will become. And Mahaprabhu laughed at him and sent him to Varanasi and told him to serve the Vaishnavas. There is the story of this Subudhi Rai. Yeah, Subudhi Rai is the name of this person. So this is there in our scripture because for you to protect your standards of jati, you need to follow, you need to be strict with yourself. That is not so much of seeing other man as fallen. So why will I not eat in any damn hotel? Because it is not about seeing that, they are all useless people, but I have to preserve my own, what shall I say, state of consciousness. So that is related to what I eat. Eating and marriage, these two things in Indian system, people are very reserved about traditionally. Nobody would eat outside their jati. Nobody would get married outside their jati. Because and today we see that because that is happening so much. So what happens is everyone comes to one common minimum, what shall I say, understanding of standards in life. I mean, where there is no standard at all. Does that make sense? That is not so much. See.
Yes. I mean, how, Prabhuji, by not eating or by eating only at home, by not eating somewhere, I can maintain jati? I mean, how that is connected, I am unable to get.
Prabhuji, because every jati has certain ways in which they eat, certain things they do, na? Like there are certain standards you follow, na? Like simple example, like devotee, if you see ISKCON devotee as one jati, though it's not technically a jati, but if you see the Brahmanical jati in general, you don't eat onion garlic, you don't eat, you have to eat sattvic food, right? So you can't eat food. So for example, for another jati, so for example, in a Kshatriya jati, that concept of eating sattvic food, for example, for them, it would be different, right? They need, their food habits also will be different by definition because they have to display valor in battle and so on. It's correct. Are you getting my point? So their food habits, everything would be different in connection to their work and their jati. So if I want to follow Brahminical principle in my life and I eat that kind of food, like in Maharashtra, we have what is called as Kolhapuri food. It's a very thika, very pungent, hot, mirchi jada hai usme, that type of food. So it may be good for some Maratha soldier to eat that and, get that. They need that. Now you can't say that is not important. Arey, that is important. Come on. It's not that I see that as fallen. No. Arey, unless a person eats like that, how will he fight on the border? If he's eating very sattvic, always in sattva gun, and he doesn't have only rajogun in his food, how will he fight? Usko waisa type ka food chahiye na fir. Then only, right? So everything is connected to your profession, your work. It's connected like that. So when I don't follow my jati regulations, then I lose my jati. As in, I have lost my individual identity. Na? I have lost my individual identity in this ocean. See, Varnashram does accommodate both. So there is both things, right? There is Achintya Beda and Abeda. So there is that distinction in terms of, everyone's position and what they need to do. And then there is that oneness of spirit also. There is oneness in so many ways. The problem is when we completely reject the oneness. And the problem is also when we completely reject the diversity and think that everything should be one only. That is also a problem because you have not accepted the reality. Does that make sense?
Okay. And Prabhuji, by not visiting, various places, or for example, we are told that one should not, allow people from lower caste to enter your home. How does that not, become discrimination?
Okay, see, first of all, home is a very private place. Okay, with temple, it is not there, mind you. This whole idea of some jati is not allowed in temple, this is a completely wrong concept. I've heard this even from very scholarly Smartha Brahmins. They talk about this, that if you are in a temple and somebody touches you as you're walking in the temple, you're not considered contaminated. Anybody it may be. Like you go to Tirupati temple and you're taking darshan of Balaji, and it's not that when ISKCON devotee told this to me, someone who is a very scholarly Brahmin, who is coming from a very Smartha tradition, who are very orthodox and very strict, they were talking from the Smriti Shastra about this, where our Shastra say that when you go to a temple or when you go to a marriage or when you go to any such, religious social function, like sometimes there are these functions, there is a procession, Hathi ke upar Bhagwan ko leke jate hain raste pe, there are crowds on the road. At such time, you end up touching so many people, right? You touch a person, who may be the caretaker of the elephant. You may be a Brahmin, that person may be from profession, he may belong to the Shudra class, fourth order, correct? But it is said in none of these things there is any contamination for the person. Because there it is said there is a oneness of spirit, that all have come to the temple, all have come to this particular religious function, even all have come to a social function, which is a marriage. Okay, so in all such things, that contamination per se doesn't apply. Home, please remember, in general, was a private thing. Home is a private place where you have your family, you have your sadhana, you have your daughters, so there people, there on a very personal level, you intermingle. Again, there also, that is also not, it's not about, there also people were obviously very flexible with it. If you see in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we have the story of Ramananda Rai, who was a governor of Madras. And not that only Mahaprabhu gave him a very high position, but in general, even the King Prataparudra, all the other people also, they associated with him at a completely different level. They would go to their house, and going to the house was not a problem, mind you. But they wouldn't eat. Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, he would go to everybody's house, but he would eat only in the house of Brahmin. You please read that. It's there in the story. He never ate in the house of a non-Brahmin, Mahaprabhu. He would even go to Shivananda Sen's house. Shivananda Sen was Vaishya, whatever, so, right? But Shivananda Sen would have to get Mahaprasad from Jagannath temple and offer it. In those days, it was like that in India at least. So what I'm saying is, going to the house was not a permanent ban per se, but eating was. Because the food habits was very much related to your mind. See, that's the point here. The way you cook food now, that has a lot to do with your mental state. And that is very much related to your occupation and work, which will get affected when you eat indiscriminately. This is a fact, certainly.
Yeah,
Eating and marriage.
So
Only in these two things people were strict, mind you. Eating and marriage. Marriage means getting married.
So Pruji, what about people studying differently, having very different setup? So these lower caste had a separate society itself.
Yeah.
Maybe today also they also have that. They have separate societies where they live together, and the upper caste may be living together, and they have separate well. I go to my village. There the lower caste have a separate well. They are not allowed to drink from the well of the upper caste people.
Okay, so first of all, I intentionally don't want to use so much this lower upper caste word. This is again, unfortunately, what happens when we talk in English, we are forced to use such terminologies, which intentionally, which somehow tends to be extremely discriminatory and arrogant, actually, higher, lower, etc. We will have to study a little bit more on this, Prabhuji, because one thing that my own understanding is that a lot of these discrimination things have come up in more recent times. So we will have to actually understand what was part of tradition and what kind of discrimination have cropped up because of immaturity of individuals. I wouldn't say that everything that has happened in the last 500,000 years in India, or even 2,000-3,000 years in India, is perfect and in line with the Vedic Siddhanta. So there are some things that are correct. There are some things that are absolutely not correct. We'll have to understand that, see, because certainly, especially in many places, this has happened, where people of certain jatis have become too discriminatory and oppressive against others. And that has boomeranged too much, actually. Okay, and actually in today's world, in some sense, it has all become completely, meaningless also. Right? Like, I mean, though I'm speaking all this, so many occasions I have also had to eat in a hotel, which is like, you don't even know Muslim may be cooking. Most of the time Muslims are, they are the people who are cooking. And if you look at from 500 years back perspective, one completely loses one's jati when one does that. So, right. So my point is, we will have to study a little more on that to understand what aspects were necessary in the separation and what aspects are more recent and were actually unnecessary. That distinction we will have to understand. But the main purpose was to maintain your standards of life. That was the purpose. And that diversity had to be met. Yeah, Haribol.
Yeah. Thank you. And just a last question, Proji. The difference between third chapter and fifth chapter is very, can you just explain in brief third and fifth?
Yeah. Prabhuji, in third chapter, in fifth chapter, Krishna is talking about karma yoga being done more subconsciously. That means, see, in third chapter, he was talking about karma yoga as something you had to do your duty. You cannot, even if you are God or even if you are a liberated person like Janak Maharaj, still you have to stick to your karma yoga and all that. And there Krishna also spoke about the danger of karma yoga. The danger of karma yoga in terms of lust. That means not danger of karma yoga, but the danger of interaction with the world. Because when you interact with the world, you can become attached to the world and lust can develop. Krishna spoke about lust also. Correct. But in the fifth chapter, he's speaking a more advanced level of karma yoga, where now you are so expert in your task that everything is happening externally as a matter of fact. Your internal self is not affected by what you are doing. That is what Krishna is talking. Correct? Padma Patra Ivambasa and all that. So like for example, someone like Vyasadeva is coming and impregnating Ambika, Ambalika, and children are born. He's doing that karma, but is he affected? No, he's not. Internally, he's not affected by that action. Can you imagine what an action? You're going and having union, sex with some woman who's not your wife at all, and you're not even affected by that action. Okay, I mean, I'm giving very extreme examples, but Krishna is certainly talking about that in the fifth chapter, where he's talking where I mentioned those verses that I read, 5.89, etc. So that's like an advanced level of karma yoga, and that's what Prabhupada calls as karma yoga action in Krishna consciousness. So where you're such an advanced yogi that you work in the world in such a way that internally आपको कुछ भी नहीं होगा. Okay, I'll take one last question. I think of
Thank you.
Smitanimay Prabhu. I think is there. Saurabh, I'm not sure which Saurabh is there, but I think it's Smitanimay Prabhu or someone else.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yeah, Haribol. Yeah, Dandavat Prabhu.
Prabhuji, you said that how to differentiate, Prabhuji. Like sometimes we see like Sai Baba worshippers, right? Everywhere, like we put that principle that that all the paths are right? Then how do we see such kind of like principles or culture or followers? Same for Islam also in the recent times, the way how it is going, right? Uh, aren't we supposed to differentiate in this? And if we are doing it, do we go to that level of ignorance where, the knowledge goes in the level of ignorance as discussed in 18th chapter? How do we differentiate?
Yeah, good point. See, when we say, again, Advaita, when we talk about that oneness, we can't take it to that extent or whatever, where we make this particular understanding that anything is okay, Sai Baba is okay. No, there is absolutely not okay. So you will have to go back to the Vedic path, right? You will have to find a proper reference within Shastra about what can be done, why it can be done, etc. Sai Baba is a complete recent time concoction or whatever. But having said that, it is also a fact that somebody may have a faith in a particular. See, it's like this. Somebody may have conceived absolute truth in a particular form, which may be Sai Baba, which is concocted or which is not approved in the Vedic path, but they may be applying certain principles that are correct. So that means even there, what I'm saying is certainly that's off track. There's no question. I mean, I'm not here to support anything and everything in the name of, being that, not that we're broad-minded means kuch bhi chalega. No. So first thing is we'll have to see what is the Vedic path. Okay, if it is not line with the Vedic path, it cannot be accepted. First thing. The same applies even with Islam and everything else, because like Mahaprabhu says that we know that, but what I'm saying is even in a wrong path, there can be a sincere practitioner. Are you understanding the point? The path may be imperfect, but the practitioner may be sincere over there. Are you getting this point? We will have to make that distinction also sometimes. Correct. So Christianity, Islam, they are very radical. Christianity is also extremely radical, in the way it functions and the way it looks at things. And Islam, of course, is super duper radical. But still, an individual may be a good person in that. The practitioner may be genuine in it. We can't deny that. We can't say that all those practices, because the individual, see, because he is conceiving God in a particular form, that form he has imagined may be wrong, but his attachment to that form, and through that form, he may be developing some of these qualities of Bhagavad Gita of the 12th chapter, 5th chapter, whatever we are reading. And if he develops those qualities, Krishna is accepting that qualities, and Krishna will give him reward for those qualities. He will certainly not go to Krishna because he's not interested in Krishna, but he's going to go in the upward direction only. Na? He's not going to see. Krishna is again, see, that's where we are different from these guys. Na? Krishna is never saying that you will go to hell if you don't accept me as a person. Krishna says you will go to hell if you fall victim to Kama, Krodha, Lobha in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, right? Kama, Krodha, Lobha are considered 3 gates to hell. It is that means when we act under lust, anger, greed, which anybody could do in the world, whether you're a devotee, non-devotee, Sai Baba, Islamic, whatever, you go to hell. But just because you don't accept Krishna, never he says. See, this is the difference between Bhagavad Gita and all the other guys. They say that if you don't accept our God, you go to hell. So that's too radical. But Gita is not like that. So I think we'll have to reconcile both these things. Is that okay? Makes sense?
Yes, Prabhuji, one more point here. 18th chapter itself, Prabhu, we have that Nitya Suttas to Sannyasa, that I think 18.7, Prabhuji, that prescribed duty should not be renounced.
Yes,
right?
given up. Yes.
So we actually were talking that, about, you gave the example of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, but I just wanted to understand that, that for the practitioners or for the Vedya Bhaktas, how we should take that, how we balance both these things in our life, right? One side of mind says, okay, go and renounce everything. One side, like, Krishna is also saying that we should contribute to the society. It's just not moving out completely.
Yeah. Okay, good question. So see, one thing is from the Gita perspective, it is very clear. Krishna has never spoken in the Gita that you are supposed to give up, right from beginning to end. So Gita perspective is totally clear. Krishna doesn't support renouncing prescribed duties. Even in the 3rd chapter, when he's talking about perfected people like Janak, or perfected people like he himself, he is supreme personality of Godhead, he says even we do our duty meticulously. Okay, so Gita is very clear. Now, how do you connect to people, to Paramahamsas like Madhavendra Puri, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, etc.? So we have to understand they did not give up prescribed duties. The point is they became so advanced in their Chetana, their love to Krishna, that these things dropped from their life. Okay, I repeat again. See, there are 2 things. One is I drop certain prescribed duties of mine. Second thing is, I am so much now engrossed in love of Krishna that all the other things just drop off from me. Okay, so when Madhavendra Puri says, Sandhya Vandana Bhadra Mastu Bhavato Bhosnana Tubhyam Namo, he says, I don't have time to offer respects to all these directions. I don't have time to offer anything to any Devata. I don't have time to offer anything to my Pitris, to my forefathers. We have to understand it is not like a neophyte devotee, who goes home and tells his father that, hey, dad, you're like Hiranyakashipu, I'm Prahlad. It is not that. This guy is complete neophyte, bum who has just come one day earlier, and he is, trying to offend his father and his forefathers. But someone like Madhavendra Puri, for them, that love of Krishna became so much in their life that they helplessly, these things got dropped from their existence. Krishna doesn't speak of that in Bhagavad Gita, but they are accommodated, certainly. Correct? I mean, they are accommodated, maybe you can say from 12.8 perspective, where Krishna is saying that always think of me and completely absorbed in me with nothing else in life. Okay, so they have reached that level. But the point is, again, but the danger in a very organized system, sometimes what happens is that people feel that unless I have reached that, my life is meaningless. So they artificially try to bump into that state of existence. No, it is not like that. You can't bump into that level of consciousness. You have to be honest to yourself where you are, and you have to function at that level. Right. So for the, I would say that maybe for 100% of population in the world, bearing some few souls you will count on your hands, that state is not your natural state of existence. So then you will have to live according to the way you are. You'll have to follow Bhagavad Gita then. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hari Bol.
Dhanyavad.
I think we are done with, there are no more questions I see, and let me just see in chat if there is something. 1 second. Okay, Sriram Gopal asks, if someone doesn't agree with the principles of Jati and wants something higher, can he give up those principles and adopt better ones? Okay, so basically, see, first of all, there is nothing like not accepting principle of Jati. I mean, I just want to clarify that point. Because see, this principle of Jati is something created by Krishna only. It is Krishna's system. This whole Varnashram, Chaturvarne Maya system, it is Krishna's system. So there's no question of, I mean, it is not a matter of debate whether we accept that or we don't, because it's part of Varnashram, and Varnashram is part of Krishna's system. Okay. Now, when we say giving up those principles and adopting better ones, I would say it's like this. If in some Jati system, there can be some practices which are influenced by Rajogun, Tamogun. Okay. And if the person, so sometimes it can come in a conflict. Okay. So I'll give an example from Mahabharata and from modern life also. I remember one devotee once told me that in his Jati, the system is that if a child is born, they have to offer some goat to some, Kula Devi. That is their Jati system. Maybe true. But now he is a Hare Krishna devotee. So he asked, should he do that? So obviously he cannot do that. He needs not do that, because, right? Because that system now is not, that system is in great conflict with the Shraddha that he's practicing. Chanting of 16 rounds of following 4 related principles. He cannot go and, chop a goat, kill a goat in front of Kali Mata. He need not do that. That part is accepted. That part is accepted. Okay. So like that, and this is there in Shastra also. You see that example of Dharma Vyad in Mahabharata. We have discussed that. He came from a meat-eating background, right? He came from a family of butchers. But because he's a devotee, what does he do? 2 things he says. One thing he says, he doesn't himself eat meat. Second thing he says is that he doesn't kill any animal. He goes to the forest, finds animals that are lying dead, takes their meat and sells them in the market. And he makes his living. So it's an amazing example of someone who was born in a Jati of butchers, where obviously they were killing and eating, but he neither killed nor he ate, but still he was in that Jati only. Okay. And he goes back to Godhead also. He goes back to Godhead. Krishna says in the 11th canto that the Dharma Vyad come back to me. Okay. So I think that people traditionally also managed that, based on that. I hope that answers Sriram Gopal. I don't know whether he's there in the group, but he had asked that question. Okay. I think there are no more questions. Okay. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna. Thanks everyone for the patient hearing. Yeah. Hare Bol.